Hello, pianists and colleagues and friends. Today we're talking about how to teach the Dance in Bulgarian Rhythm No.2 by Bartók. This is from Mikrokosmos, Volume 6. It's number 149, and it sounds like this. If we haven't met before, my name is Janna Williamson, and welcome to my home piano studio in the suburbs of Chicago. I did mention this piece in a previous video all about asymmetrical and mixed meter, so I'll be sure to link that if you click right up there. But just to say, the primary focus of this piece really is this Bulgarian rhythm. So when teaching this piece, we're going to focus a lot on that rhythm. However, I will say, be sure to stick around to the end because one of the other problematic things about this piece is the pedal, and I'm going to address that at the very end. So let's talk briefly about mixed meter and asymmetrical meter. This is written in 7/8, meaning 7 beats in a measure with the 8th note getting the beat. However, Bartók notates it 2 plus 2 plus 3. So really he's creating this mixed meter out of that asymmetrical meter that we have groups of 7, but it's divided into 2 plus 2 plus 3. And if you're not familiar at all with Bulgarian rhythm, if you're like me and you've lived your entire life in the United States, the traditional Bulgarian dance is fascinating because it does include these asymmetrical meters or these moments where you feel like, how are they even doing that dance? So I'm going to be sure to link a video of a traditional dance of Bulgarian dancers. And I would love for you to pull that up and watch it and see if you can count along and figure out what the meter is. It's just really fascinating. They tend to add a little kick or movement with their foot up in the air rather than the stepping movements, which is that extra beat, the beat that makes it more asymmetrical. So it's really worth looking at those, showing those to your students so they have some idea. Plus, the dancing is just beautiful. The traditional dress is beautiful as well. So when students learn a piece in an asymmetrical or mixed meter, the most important thing is that they understand the microbeat and that microbeat, in this case the 8th note, must be constant the whole time. And you can certainly do some movement around the room or even just some basic tapping like 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Or you can try counting to 7, but I think that's much more difficult. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Of course, you can reverse hands on that. You could do some sort of 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, or clapping the teacher's hands like 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1. Anything that's going to ingrain in their body and their ear what this 2 plus 2 plus 3 feeling is. And then I would go through the piece and find moments where it has that. So it's very obvious at the beginning we have this left, right, left, right, left, right, right, which creates that 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Then the main motive in measure 4 also has that same left, right pattern similarly, but with a slur at the end of the left-hand part. So it's 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. And this brings me to the other main thing that's super important in Bartók, and that is the articulation. When you look at most of Bartók's pieces for students, which would include the collection for children, and I do have a video about that piece Play from that collection. So for children, 10 easy pieces, or certainly Mikrokosmos, you will find that most pieces have an articulation mark on almost every note. I would venture to say you're talking an average of 80 to 95% of the notes in each of these pieces has an articulation marking, such as a slur, a staccato, an accent, a sforzando, anything like that. So it does require very careful attention to that. And as teachers, our job is to listen to our students playing and draw their attention to whether or not they are actually playing the articulation. I'm pretty sure that if you play Bartók, most of his pieces with good rhythm, and accurate and expressive articulation, you have most of your work done. I'm not saying there isn't anything else you have to do, but those are the two main focuses. All right, we have many accidentals in this piece. There is no key signature. It tends to sound like C minor or C Aeolian, but there are many other interesting 20th century idioms put in this piece throughout. So we have other modal sounds within it, some interesting scales starting in 18. And I don't think you have to go through those and analyze every single one of them with your students, but it would be helpful to find what are the normal, natural minor scale patterns that you're seeing, and then maybe what's the variation on that. Well, this one starts with 2 whole steps like a major scale, and then has that half step right there. So just kind of analyzing a little bit of where are the half steps and whole steps will draw their attention to the non-major and minor scales, as well as eventually help them memorize this because they'll be hearing the half steps and whole steps correctly. Other 20th century idiom things found in this particular piece would be a lot of movement by half steps, as well as several tritones. This comes up particularly in this little middle section at starting at 24. There it is, 24. That left hand plays that E flat to A tritone, and that keeps coming back. It's switched into the right hand at 27. And that's even built on, it's inverted from here to here. And that's such a classic 20th century sound, right? To include that tritone. There are other places where you have clusters and augmented chords, such as towards the end in measure 48, the left hand is playing an E augmented chord down below. Or if you inverted it, it could be a C augmented chord. Either way, but it's over E in measure 48. And then some clusters in 51, you have this really interesting D flat, E, A flat, B flat, which because it's down so low and you're adding, the A natural in the right hand, it gets really dissonant right there. So my best tip for students dealing with unusual sounds or dissonance is to just go for it. And I've said this in other videos for sure about 20th century pieces or other new music, that if you shy away from that dissonance and don't lean into it or give it its full accent right there at 51, there is an accent on the A natural in the right hand. If you don't do that, it actually loses a lot of its luster and it doesn't come to life. It sounds kind of apologetic, like, I'm sorry, I'm playing a dissonant note right now. Instead, if you really go for it, it's like, ooh, that's a dissonant note and it's interesting. And then we can really enjoy when it resolves, which in this case is on the open C fifth in measure 55. That is so consonant. There's only 2 notes and they're a perfect fifth apart, so it's perfectly consonant. And we can enjoy that after all the dissonance that has built up before that. Of course, in Bartók and all 20th century music, we frequently have contrasting dynamics, and that is a really important thing to do in this piece. When you combine dynamics and articulation like sforzandos or accents, then again, the music really comes to life, and it's best done when a student really just commits and goes for it. So one of the places in this piece that is a typical problem for students is in that B section. After we have all these scales, then we have this pattern where it kind of opens up with that tritone in 24, and that all starts fine. But once you get to 26, the left hand becomes more intricate, and it definitely needs to be brought out because that's where the more melodic content is. So in 27, that's the melody. The right hand is just doing these repeated notes, kind of the offbeat feel. And that's a change from previously, and it is a little bit more difficult for most students' left hands to be nimble enough, as well as be willing to really bring that part out with all those tenutos on there. Do also notice that the ties in the right hand in that part can be problematic. So at the pick up to 28 is D, E flat, tie those 2 notes, and then accent the A. So you kind of have to rotate up on the bottom part of your hand and then flick towards the A with your pinky to get that accent. And then same thing on the downbeat of 29, that you play the pickup and then you flick that D on top. Most of my students have been very reticent to actually do that, and I'm not entirely sure if it's just that the ties make them think I can't possibly play accented because they're thinking they have to drop into it. If you rotate up towards the left, then you can drop in towards the right and get a good accent. All right, so I promised you I'd talk about pedal at the end. At this level, which I would consider upper intermediate, this is listed on the AIM in Illinois, level 10, and it's also listed on the RCM level 10, but do note that if you're going to use it for RCM, you have to play 2 of the dances in Bulgarian rhythm. So I would put this at upper intermediate. Students should understand that the pedal is no longer a on and off switch. It's much more like a dimmer switch that we might use for a light that dims that you can kind of gradually turn. And I'm looking at this in the Festival Collection Book 8, and the editor, Helen Marley, has put at the bottom that she suggests that the pedal markings, which are Bartók's, they happen at measure 1 and measure 8, she suggests only using a quarter pedal. So I would definitely experiment with students. How much can you go down on the pedal just to get enough of the dampers opened that we get this feel of some connection, but it's not super syrupy and overdone. This is particularly important in the ending, I think, because you have to pedal the downbeat of 55 in order to get that top C to actually continue through. It's written to continue for 3 full measures. And you have to move your right hand down to play the G in the middle of that part. So you're here. But if you put the pedal 100% down, I think personally it's too much after the rest of this piece. So this applies to many, many other pieces at the upper intermediate and certainly advanced levels where students need to understand that it's not just an on and off. And as a side note, when students are performing on a piano that's not their own or not the one in your studio, they are also going to need to truly listen with their ears. I always tell my students before you play, even if you are not allowed to warm up on the piano, at the very least just take your foot and slowly depress the damper pedal to kind of feel how it feels, how difficult it is to get it to go down, how far it goes down. And then as they begin this piece, they can experiment with only going down part of the way to just open the damper pedals but not overdo it. I hope that gives you some good ideas on teaching this very fun dance in Bulgarian rhythm. I realized I didn't say at the beginning, there are 6 of these, and it's really interesting to look at them and see that they don't all have the same time signature. So if you have other thoughts about these dances, I'd love to hear them. Let me know which ones you've taught and which ones you've had success with. I've taught this piece many times and I've enjoyed it every single time. If you have other pieces you want me to cover, please leave a comment in the comments below, and I wish you all the best in your teaching.